Welcome everybody to our Leaders in Housing Counseling call for the second one in 2021. Glad to have you here, and we're going to jump right in because we'd like to spend the call mostly on our main topic. We're going to do a couple just housing counseling updates, but we're going to do this quickly so that we can spend most of our time with David Berenbaum. Many of you, I'm sure, know him already, and we're all very pleased that he's now the head of the HUD Office of Housing Counseling. We will really devote the time for this call on this, and just to frame it up quickly, we'll give him a chance to talk a little bit about what his vision and for the office is and updates he'd like to provide, and we'll spend a lot of the call really on fielding questions from you. So put questions into the communication box and let us, and Ellie will do her magic in getting them asked. We'll cram as much as we can into the hour, and we might go over a little bit, but we're trying to keep it within reason here. So with that quick note, I'm going to just start on the housing counseling updates. So on the funding picture, we have been hard at work and appreciate the time that a number of you have spent on this as well. We're trying to get housing counseling funding built into the stimulus package. We're pretty sure it's not in there now, and we have the critical thing is that we have strong supporters. There's a great push coming from Senators Menendez and Senator Brown. I'm sure there's from other Senate offices. Chairwoman Maxine Waters' staff has been doing a very good job about trying to elevate these. They are not appropriators, and the critical issue is having the appropriators be the ones to get this put into the bill. So there's so much they can do, but at some point it's up to the leadership and the appropriations to do that. So we've talked on the call at different times about who the appropriators are. You can certainly look it up, but to the extent that you're in a district that represents that, and you can contact your House and Senate appropriators, that would be very, very helpful right now. And literally as in right now, as in today. All these decisions are getting made right now. I can't say how quickly the bill will move, but there's definitely a very active conversation that's been going on all week. And we've been working and contacting offices and continuing to try to reach out and position. The thing, you don't need to be really technical about it. We've gotten into the weeds about wording, but I think the critical issue is that housing counseling funding get included in the stimulus bill, whether it's you don't even have to say it. If it's a regular bill or reconciliation, it goes into each one, but you don't even have to be that technical. I think the push is just to say, try to get funding in. It looks like our friends are advocating for $100 million in a contribution to the housing counseling work, and the idea would be that wouldn't necessarily be the only money, but it would be a starter, and that's what's politically possible in the current environment. So please do your communications, emails, and calls would be very helpful right now. That's in today. And thanks to those people that are already doing that, and I appreciate that you've been keeping me informed on it as well. Just another quick update. As you know, lots of changes going on with the administration, and lots of things that we think are very, very positive for our work and for the general economy and for the people that we work with. So we're very encouraged about that. And on the executive orders, we understand one of the earliest executive orders was repealing the stereotyping, the ban on things like systemic racism, and we talking about that and doing that in trainings and providing funding for those things. So I mean, it's nice to see some early action and lots of positive things. And recognition around lots of the issues around economic justice and racial and ethnic fairness that we think that a lot of you work in that practically in that field, that this can all be helpful. Obviously, a lot more work will need to be done, but we think that there lots of very smart people coming into the administration to help work on this, and it is clearly a focus of theirs. I just want to give a quick shout out on what's happening at HUD here, because there's been an influx of new people here, so it's been very quick, and we think pretty thoughtful, and a few names that are familiar to us and hopefully to some of you. So Jen Jones is the Chief of Staff at HUD for the Secretary. She is was at NCRC past couple of years, and then was previously in the former HUD under a Democratic administration, and we think she'll be great and very helpful. Obviously, the Chief of Staff is a key role in developing program and making them work effectively. Joe Carlisle, who has been as a staffer in Congress for a long time, deeply knowledgeable, is going to be on the Senate, on the HUD staff as a senior advisor for budget policy and programs. And one of the wonderful things about him is that he's always been quite accessible, and that will be helpful for our work and other people's work. I don't think she's been on our calls before, but we have done a lot of work with Alana McCargo, who has been at Urban Institute. She's a leading researcher and voice on how to elevate and address racial justice issues. She's deeply knowledgeable and deeply analytic, data-driven. She's going to be the senior advisor on housing finance. This is a powerful and very valuable position where you use the phrase "people are policy." This is a place where we will get, I think, a much different tone on very critical issues. So very exciting there. We did a little bit of work with the Principal Deputy General Counsel, Damon Smith. In the previous administration, he did some meetings with us around the settlements and negotiating settlements, and very reasonable person. I mean, one of the issues we always worry about with the General Counsel's office is that things get stuck there, and I think he had a much more flexible view of things, so this might be helpful. We all experience things being stuck in the General Counsel's office during the whole certification deadline period, which took months, and my guess is that he will be much better on these kind of moving them quickly and getting them done issues. Will Innes is the special assistant to the in the Federal Housing Administration in the FHA. He comes from the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, has been on has participated in our calls, I guess not as a guest, but is somebody who's progressive and will have be helpful and accessible to us as well. So we're pleased with all that. And I think the other good news is that the team that we have in place at the Office of Housing Counseling is going to remain in place, and that's very good. And we all have good working relationships. They obviously have reached out and worked with many of you, and we think that they are a key point for us being in the administration, and we hope and are encouraging that housing counseling become more deeply integrated into the work that HUD does in general, so that we can do more work along these lines. And I think, as we talked about before, and pivot right now, David Berenbaum is somebody from our ranks who who's now the head of the Office of Housing Counseling. He's had deep experience in our field, was at NCRC, and did great fair housing and housing work in general. Was the head of the CEO of HPF, the Homeownership Preservation Foundation, had a leadership role in the Coalition for HUD Intermediaries, helped convene many of their thought-leading meetings, has been a kind of a visionary in thinking about our work. It's very exciting to have him on the inside now, and we're very pleased both that he's here and that he's already been doing a lot of outreach to practitioners in the field. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David, and just to give a quick framework actually just on what to expect here. What we're going to do is we'll have David talk for a period of time just to give us updates and his perspective on where he thinks things are going. And we'd like to leave the rest of the call to questions that you raise. So you can put them into the communication box so that Ellie will field them and be able to frame them up for questions for David as we go along. We're going to try to keep it to an hour, but might run over if there's too much demand in terms of questions. So with that, very much welcome, David. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Ellie. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And hopefully my sound is on, my video's on, and everything is working from a technology perspective. It's a real pleasure to join you today. It's such exciting times, both within the Office of Housing Counseling, as well as at HUD as a whole. I mean, today we have the hearings for Secretary nominee Marcia Fudge, Congresswoman Fudge, before the Senate Banking Committee. You're seeing the announcements coming out of the administration and HUD itself right now. Certainly, it's a moment of great excitement for our office as well, because we believe that there is such opportunity to be part of this wave of action within HUD itself. My hope today is to share 10 priorities in 10 minutes with you. We are working internally on taking a real fresh, generative look at the work we're doing and how we work with you. But before I do that, I wanted to share some news from our conversations individually with many of you, as well as with Bruce and Ellie and others. We're very sensitive to the impact of the national health emergency right now, and particularly on how you are operating and some of the challenges that you are facing during the pandemic. First, thank you for all of the good work that you are doing. I want to also thank all of those who took the time to respond in December to our disaster and national emergency survey. I hope during some of the Q&A today and discussion, I'll be able to share some of the outcomes from that research. But one of the areas that I definitely took note of, and my colleagues, the wonderful staff of the Office of Housing Counseling took note of, was some of the challenges that you are facing. And we've noted that for some agencies, the ability to draw down funds has become more challenging. So everyone is aware that the period of performance for both the fiscal year 19 and 20 comprehensive housing counseling grants end approximately a little over 2 months from now, on March 31st of this year. Now, fiscal year 19 grants, which were extended, will have to be spent by that date or the funds will be recaptured. However, I'm happy to share with you that your points of contacts are going to be engaging with you with regard to the fiscal year 20 funds. You can request a performance period extension of up to 12 months. Now, you're going to need to do this in writing, and you need to engage with your point of contact to provide a justification. The justification is nothing new. You've seen this before. One, the necessity of the requested extension. Second, the specific time frame of the proposed extension. And last, how the funds will be effectively spent within the extension period. Now, you're going to need to submit this request on or before March 1st of 2021. And I think that this is going to be I hope it's good news for some of you who are concerned about this issue. Bruce and Ellie have been raising this issue in some of our initial discussions. We want to support you during the pandemic. At the same time, we're also aware that many organizations are seeing increases in demand for services, and they're doing their best to meet that demand. And thank you for that. And it's our hope as we move forward to get some of the new appropriation funds out onto the street as quickly as possible. And I'll move into that discussion now. So here we go, 10 priorities in 10 minutes. First, it's hard to believe, but it's only been a month and a half since I arrived in my new role. But we have been having some great discussions internally at the Office of Housing Counseling, and as well inviting feedback from all of our external partners. The goal being to take a fresh look at the office. For many, we're sort of perceived as we were when we were first stood up, as sort of an adjunct to the Office of Single Family Housing. And often you've heard the terms CRA modernization or financial modernization. Our priority is to take a fresh look at Office of Housing Counseling modernization right now. So priorities, let's go through it a little bit. First, of course, it only makes sense that our number one priority right now is to provide assistance, both technical and funding, to reach pandemic impacted households. 1 in 5 renters are currently impacted by the pandemic, and 1 in 10 homeowners are financially impacted. They all run the risk of displacement, and of course, we're very sensitive to the issues with regard to moratoria and forbearance and other issues right now. We're also taking a close look at the impact in rural areas, and in particular, how we can work more closely with tribal entities. Some of you may be aware that we're convening a series of consults with tribal entities or tribal nations so that we can broaden their impact with regard to how housing counseling is provided in those rural and other areas. We want to fast track some of the programs that we're working on right now. And a very heavy lift for us is looking at the new eviction prevention demonstration funds, the $20 million that I'm sure you've covered in previous calls. We're engaging with experts in the field. We're getting consultation and advice on programs that are best in class. And it is our intent, assuming we can move this quickly through the processes and checks at HUD through various offices, that these funds will become part of the fiscal year 2021 NOFO competition.
Wow.
We are absolutely going to continue to provide targeted trainings and continuing educations that I hope many of you have been finding helpful. And we're going to begin a new series through our outreach initiative and some of Jerry's work on our staff called Communities of Practice, where we're going to invite you as experts in the field to have a dialogue with other experts and share your thoughts, observations, and recommendations in a very informal environment, both to celebrate best practices and model programs, as well as for us to have takeaways in partnership with you. Next priority or objective, and these are informal, they're not written yet, they're all in development and discussion. My hope is we're going to be sharing these with the new administrations, they move into their roles. These will be ultimately not only a short-term 1 fiscal year goal, but ultimately craft our work over the next 3 fiscal years. I call the next one, how we tell our story. We're going to be taking a look at all of our internal and external programming to build strategic, consistent communication with you, all of our stakeholder partners, and consumers across the nation. Now, this will also involve using greater use of technology to celebrate our impact, and also ideally doing more in the area of reports and marketing and other areas. And we can speak more about that in the Q&A. Of course, funding is a very important issue to us, and we're looking at that very, very deeply. Funding both indirectly to you through partnerships and new demonstration programs, such as some of the ones you're working on to try to leverage pre-purchase counseling and consistent funding for that space, as well as to ensure innovative programs receive private sector support, but also internally at HUD. And I believe if we're documenting our impact and also tapping in more effectively with HUD programs such as FHA, that we can impact our funding and ideally increase it. Next, there's no question in our collective mind, I believe, we're in agreement that housing counselors need to be celebrated as an integral part of the housing finance and real estate value chain. That's been a discussion point for all of us over the past few years, and it is a high priority for the Office of Housing Counseling. It was one of the founding reasons for certification of counselors in the first instance. So we want to leverage that certification and expand our counseling agencies at capacity and also respect. Part of this will also to be work more closely with Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie Mae, and other trade associations to promote that as well. I mentioned internally the desire to work with HUD offices. I think there's a lot of opportunity to strengthen our partnerships, even internally at HUD. FHA is a prime example, and those conversations have begun already. You know, we're talking about modernization of FHA's systems and technology, a great opportunity for capturing data from the housing counseling community, as well as exploring opportunities for improved programming. For example, I could speak to foreclosure prevention in the HECM product as a perfect example of that, or other areas where funding can be reviewed and perhaps some new programming considered. Let's talk certification for a moment. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all of your good work in this space. I believe this month we are going to reach the milestone of 80% certification. And I'll share with you, I've shared this with Bruce and many others, we're going to be sending you a letter. It's going to be an informal challenge to reach full certification by April the 31st. In fact, 3 letters are going out. I'll give you a sneak peek. The first is a good starting point. We're going to congratulate all of the organizations that have reached the milestone of full certification. And that is a wonderful milestone, and your counselors are to be congratulated for their accomplishment because it really is great. The next letter is going to be what I described for those who are sort of in progress. The agencies that have 1 or more certified counselors, but haven't reached what we believe to be the full number of counselors you currently may have in employment. It's going to share this challenge with you, congratulate you for your work to date, and once again offer any resources that we can provide internally or through our contractors to help you bring it home. The last letter will be to the agencies that have no certified housing counselors. Again, it's going to offer our support, but it will also speak to some of the realities of what that means, because we know under Dodd-Frank that in fact with the new extension that by August 1st, we have to reach that full milestone, or it can negatively impact on funding and certification of the agency. And we hope that is not a reality. And in fact, having reached 80%, I think actually the likelihood is that we are going to make our goals. What we're trying to do is prepare for the possibility that one, there may be a new appropriation. Bruce spoke to it, possibly through Congress, and we're going to really need to be ready to scale up to meet the needs of our consumers and our communities to provide services along the lines of what happened during the financial crisis. And we are preparing, in fact, for that next cohort or class of counselors. And so we're trying to get ahead of these issues so that we are part of the safety net. Again, thank you for what you're doing. This is simply a challenge, a friendly challenge for us to get there. And the August 1st date does remain the operational date. With regard to who we serve, we have such a wonderful group of intermediaries, housing finance agencies, local, regional groups. You all serve particular constituencies and communities. Internally at HUD, we're going to be examining how we can greater engage with every community: tribal, African American, Latino, Asian, veterans, persons with disabilities, non-English speaking groups, and I could go on. The idea being, we want to be sure that we are addressing issues such as racial equity, the wealth gap, and as well as joining some amazing private sector initiatives that you have developed. This will also include, under the appropriation, looking at historically Black colleges and universities, as well as other organizations that serve specific groups. And we're still doing our due diligence on that aspect of the appropriation, which some of you may note is about $3 million. Now, moving forward as well, I'm almost done, Bruce, I promise. We're going to really seek to embrace new technology and leverage it to really document our impact. You know, already we've begun to discuss some collaboration or ongoing collaboration with the Housing Partnership Initiative that NHRC and the intermediaries have been part of. The idea of developing a standardized housing counseling data set in the CMS are all very attractive issues, and we fully applaud that. We're also going to be looking at moving our HCAMS module ahead. That is our new system for, in fact, trying to bring efficiencies to everything we do, from reporting to grant review. Of course, funds are tight on a federal level, but this is a high priority for us. For those of you who have been working with us on the 9902 update and reporting forms, we're also going to be moving that along. And though not directly related technology, I would say it's more in my last category, making it easier to do business with us. We're going to be finally looking to complete the Housing Counseling Handbook or Manual prior to the end of this fiscal year at HUD. And I'm putting a lot of workload on our talented staff at the Office of Housing Counseling, but they are all very happy to be moving this forward. And if last as well, and then I'll conclude with a cup of coffee and one of my favorite mugs. Cheers, everyone. We're also looking to jumpstart the Housing Counseling National Advisory Committee. And we know it's been a long wait. Recommendations are under review by new leadership. So stay tuned on that front, and we'll see what feedback we receive. So Bruce and Ellie, with that, I really look forward to our conversation, and I hope I didn't take too long on that.
That's great. Thanks so much, David. So we do have several questions. The first series of questions comes from the housing counseling team at the Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California. Some of these you may have answered, David, so just say that you answered them. I just want to get them all out to make sure that the questions come out. What is the upcoming NOFA process? Is there a timeline for the upcoming NOFA? And is there a process in place to have the NOFA released earlier to avoid overlapping grants?
So this is a frequent question. It's a very fair one. We are looking to release the NOFA. It's going to be a NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity. There is a technical change in title. We are looking to get that on the street, so to speak, as quickly as possible. In fact, staff were prepared to put it through appropriate clearances at HUD, but then the wonderful holiday present of the new appropriation came through. So I can tell you we are fully focused on the new aspects of the appropriation. And once we have approval from all the various departments at HUD, as well as I think a very strong program, we hope to put that funding out very quickly. Our goal is to move back to follow the federal fiscal year as far as appropriation and drawdown of funds for all of you. But we understand the importance of getting these funds out quickly, particularly the new housing counseling eviction prevention demonstration program.
Great. Okay. Regarding counseling impacts, is there a list of broader definitions and requirements for the different impacts?
I think that's part of our collective conversation. I will share with you that two priorities for me in our conversations collectively as a trade is both the consumer's financial health and assets at first contact, but then something I think we have to do more is also checking in 3 months and 6 months out to see the impact of our work. And there's some interesting data sets from organizations that effectively do that I think will be very helpful for us to build out further. The ability also to document impact on credit score or savings or credit choice, student loan, mortgage loan, what have you, I think are going to be some very interesting findings. Digging down a bit further, I also believe that we also have to look at our clients as they come to us. So the characteristics or market segment they're from when they're coming to us, as well as the impact that we have. For example, do we reach single moms, similarly to how we reach other groups? Persons with disabilities, through accommodation requests or other needs, are we providing a similar level of services? The African American community, if we parse middle income consumers from the African American community, perhaps they're professionals, versus low mod consumers from that community, are there any differences in our impact? These are all important pieces of information for us to know. And I could go on. Right now, we're just following the 9902. There will be some changes. Thank you. Many of you gave us impact previously on that, and now we're going to be moving forward on it. But I think there's an ability for all us to capture more data through best voluntary compliance efforts. And I look forward to further conversation on that front.
Great. Along the same lines, is there a comprehensive list of required fields for 9902 submission data?
I will defer to our team as we begin to socialize what's happening with the 9902. I can share with you that we're going to work very closely with CMS providers as well as the counseling community as a whole, not only socializing where we're going, but also offering trainings as well.
Great. And then I do believe that you addressed this question, but I'll ask at any rate, what is the new timeline for HUD certification for every counselor?
It remains August 1st.
2021.
Correct. Okay. Now, ideally, I'm hoping groups, again, we're reaching this big milestone of 80%. I ask you to please make every effort to try to get it done in the next 3 months. I believe for the majority of our staff out there, it's highly possible to do that. And then we'll start to focus on really, the business of doing business as housing counselors.
Great. Okay. Chicanos por la Causa in Arizona says, good morning, David. Congratulations on your appointment. We're excited for you. Can you speak a little more on the significance of having Representative Fudge as the Secretary of HUD?
I'm very excited. I have to qualify what I'm saying that, under Dodd-Frank, the office, as was noted earlier, the Office of Housing Counseling is 100% civil service, including my position, which is a senior executive service role. So it's been very interesting for me as a new member of the HUD staff watching the transition because so many staff around our office are transitioning and we're going through onboarding now. But I'm very excited about Secretary Fudge. Her commitment to poverty issues, to economic opportunity in low to moderate income communities, about paving a path to the middle income for her populations that she has served historically, even in rural areas through her commitment to areas of the work of USDA. I think it's extremely promising. And then I'll also add, of course, HUD is committed to equal housing opportunity. And so everything that I have heard about her history, speaking to the issue to civil rights, the importance of equal housing opportunity and housing finance and housing choice, I think it bodes well for HUD.
Great. Is there any discussion of a hardest hit fund similar to the one established in 2010? In Florida, it was a very successful program to get funds quickly to those homeowners impacted by the housing crisis.
So I can't speak to what's happening on the 10th floor yet, because that's still filling in. I will say from some of the points that were raised earlier, some of the discussions that were happening that Bruce raised to the group, I do believe that there is, for the Office of Housing Counseling, for the Office of Housing at HUD and FHA, we need to be looking at programming that mirrors what we did during the financial crisis. The reality now, in the absence of that, is that there is not the capacity to engage with consumers through one-on-one counseling or other means. And while I applaud what mortgage services have done to date with what I'll describe as a rather streamlined process to getting forbearance agreements, I am very worried about what's going to happen as these periods for forbearance start to expire. We're going to need to have more resources. So stay tuned on that front. I mean, to a large extent, that is policymakers, but I do think, and I do believe the staff at HUD are focused on this issue, but I think we're going to need also the collaboration of folks on Capitol Hill. The White House, I think, understands it, but we're going to need collaboration on Capitol Hill as well.
I could jump in on that a little bit. So there is a push to create a fund for homeowners in distress. The Homeowners Assistance Fund, and the idea was $25 billion might go into the stimulus bill. So that's in the mix, and that does have, I know advocates have talked about it. I haven't actually seen the wording. The idea would be that it would have a similar structure to the hardest hit.
Right.
Okay. David, could you repeat the date that you expect the new housing counselor manual to come out?
There is not a firm date. Good question. I know this is something that's been on everyone's radar for several years now. It is a heavy lift within HUD because every chapter, every section must be reviewed by various offices. But it is my hope that by the end of this fiscal year, which would be essentially September-ish, it will become a public document. It could happen before that. It all depends on the internal review process.
Okay. When could an agency draw down on funds for the fiscal year 2020 when they did not receive funds in fiscal year 2019?
I'm not sure I fully understand. Do they have an executed grant right now?
That's what I think is the question. So they have a fiscal year 2020 grant, but they don't have a fiscal year 2019 grant.
Yeah, so there are a number of different contingencies to that question. I would prefer that be directed to their point of contact, actually, because I don't know every agency's individual circumstances. So I direct them to speak to their point of contact for follow-up on that.
What work will be done to continue to elevate the value proposition of homebuyer education and counseling to consumers?
Yeah, that is definitely one of my priorities. Many of you are aware is that there is an ongoing study with regard to outcomes from pre-purchase counseling that's going on right now at HUD. So I look forward to that final release of that document. As well, I'm very pleased with the progress that you and other members of the Housing Counseling Committee have made to work with Fannie and Freddie and others to get more meaningful data as part of the origination process as well. I think that ultimately we have to look internally as well and work with the new leadership of HUD to try to jumpstart some of the marketing efforts that happened several years ago. The demonstration or marketing campaign tests, all of the surveys that we were all part of, and that is something that we are looking very seriously at. That said, I also believe that the Office of Housing Counseling can be doing a lot more to work with responsible trade associations and other partners in the field to really celebrate the impact of housing counselors so that they are viewed as go-to housing professionals the way realtors, mortgage brokers, et cetera, are viewed as well. And I look forward to collaborating with you on this front. I view it as another area where I'd like to convene a community of practice for further discussion.
Wonderful. Is the Office of Housing Counseling and the CFPB working on any type of collaboration to improve and enhance our work? It seems that sometimes the different agencies are not necessarily on the same page when it comes to housing counseling.
Well, the answer is we will be. I'm sure historically we have as well. But I do believe there's a lot of opportunity for future close collaboration. And I've already touched base with several colleagues at CFPB. Part of this is also waiting for new leadership to be in place, and then we'll begin that dialogue. And I think that it is a perfect moment in time in face of the pandemic and its challenges for us to be doing that.
Okay, so we got a couple of certification questions here.
Okay.
Once a new counselor is hired, how long do they have to become certified?
I'll have to defer to my team on that, but I think that's a very fair question that I'm probably going to have to follow up on. In theory, I'm not sure yet if we have actually addressed that issue. So I think that's an area where my first reaction is an area we need to provide some additional guidance to the counseling community on. I could be mistaken on that, but right now I would say it's technically, unless I'm corrected by my team, it's still the August 1st deadline. But moving forward after that, I think we're going to need to specify some greater clarity on that. I'll follow up with NHRC on that. I may simply not have all the information in front of me, but I think that's an area we need to clarify.
Great. HUD housing counselors are underpaid for the certifications that are required to do the job, as well as the type of service provided. Will there be funds to improve the salaries of housing counselors?
So first, I agree with the statement that professional housing counselors, as a general rule of thumb, are not compensated adequately. But I also have to make the point that that level of compensation is often in the controls of the management of each of our agencies, or public agency, housing finance agency, or the like. I hope that we can find a path to increasing the capacity of groups, which also includes ensuring that we retain and professionalize staff through compensation as well. I'm very sensitive in all my years in the industry of turnover of really highly qualified housing counselors moving to other roles because of a higher level of salary. or compensation overall. So it's a very fair point. To the extent that I can be an advocate for increased appropriations, more private sector support, greater efficiencies in our programs, I hope to be that advocate. And again, I will do everything in my power to get us to that point. But I also have to recognize the limits of each agency's business model and budget and so on is also quite unique and different. And that's something that we, as the Office of Housing Counseling, cannot control.
Okay, this question is something that we've already spoken with you about, David, but I'm going to ask it here so you can talk with other groups as well about it. Can you provide some guidance on why eviction prevention funding through ESG has been suspended and what we can do to get this resolved? This comes from a group in the Capital Region of New York they're still seeing evictions take place even with the moratorium in place.
Yeah. And thank you for raising that issue. It's a very important one. And NHRC did send us a letter requesting that we look into this issue. And internally at HUD, we are. There is apparently quite a bit of discretion on the part of the states how they will, in fact, use funds. But we are working internally to try to ensure that the knowledge that funds can be used in the counseling space and can be used now, meaning regardless of a particular tenant's status in housing. If someone has a fear of eviction, if someone is being wrongfully evicted, et cetera, there are many other circumstances, but it can be used now rather than at a later date. And please stay tuned on that front. We're working internally at HUD. And again, there are many states where, in fact, you can use that funding for other continuum of care support for this activity. So we're looking at the issue, and I'll follow up with NHRC.
I will just comment that David and his staff have been very engaged with us on this issue. So rest assured, they're definitely addressing it.
But I'd also like to say that it's really helpful when you have exasperating situations like that to elevate them to us, so we can figure out how to address them and work on them. This is kind of what makes us a vital organization. So big thanks to the people that raised the issue and be thinking about others to be raising.
Yeah, and I'll add, Bruce, thank you for that, and also add that please bring them to my attention or our team's attention, your point of contact. We are looking at all of these issues now, getting back to my opening point of, as we're looking to modernize the Office of Housing Counseling to reflect today's needs, these are fair issues for us. I'll simply put out there as well, very sensitive to some of the exceptions that have been made to one-on-one counseling to allow virtual. But we know that today, virtual, telephonic, and face-to-face counseling, as long as the quality is there, the appropriate quality controls are there, they are all equally effective. So I could give you a long list of issues we're looking at that we feel we may have to do some regulatory updates to. Again, the goal is to bring the Office of Housing Counseling into the present and how you are, in fact, doing business so that we're all more efficient and effective.
Okay, this is about fee for service. Is there any chance housing counseling agencies will be able to charge a fee for service to lenders when it comes to the proper preparation of home buyers to the marketplace? This has been work that NHRC has promoted in the past few years, and we'd like to see this move forward without the fee being a RESPA issue.
Well, I think that harkens back to the point of how we collaborate with the CFPB. But I look forward to that discussion. I understand the point. It also relates also to sort of how loans are packaged by counseling, potentially counseling organizations for lenders, or prepackaged because it's really not an underwriting function. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for discussion there. Look forward to it.
Okay. Bruce, do you want to say anything about that and what we're doing?
You can go ahead if you want. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'll just say that we are continuing. There is a working group actually working on the fee for service and trying to figure out is there kind of a standard and what are groups around the country doing already around fee for service. So stay tuned for more on that.
Yeah.
Is there any update on affirmatively furthering fair housing?
Not at this time, other than what you've been reading as public statements from the White House and also from HUD's acting secretary.
Okay. Somebody is asking about any funds that might be similar to there's a mortgage assistance program in New York State. I think we talked a little bit earlier about Bruce mentioned the funds that are potentially in the stimulus bill that are similar to hardest hit funds. The mortgage assistance program in New York, David, you're probably familiar with it, but it was more about offering people a silent second on their mortgage to pay off arrears and reinstate the mortgage. And so this person is just wondering if there's is HUD pushing for streamlines or just restarting the loans rather than having everyone modify?
What I can share with you is that I do believe the FHA staff are right on the cutting edge of these issues, and they're closely monitoring the portfolio performance and needs of consumers in the portfolio. I can't speak beyond that at this time, but I think everyone is watching the marketplace and performance very closely. Now, my concern again is after some of these forbearance or stays, moratoria and the like expire. And I am concerned about the financial health of our consumers. And that's where the important work that you do is going to be so critical. I suspect between now and then more programs will be promulgated. But again, a lot of it depends on how Congress appropriates funds.
This isn't a question, it's just a comment that you'll probably appreciate and everybody on the call would appreciate. Wow, that's the first time I heard the White House understands in 4 years. Okay. This question is, what system is the best to collect HUD's data and works with the 9902?
Well, with regard to the changes to the 9902, all of the CMS systems will have to update. And I want to add, we're going to allow time for that. There'll be overlap of old and new. So please don't worry, we're going to work very closely with all of you, both those who have their own proprietary systems as those who use third-party systems. With regard to additional information about the 9902, it's HUD's role never to endorse a system, so I'm not going to go there.
Okay. Is continuing education needed after a counselor passes the HUD exam?
That's a great question. And I've really started to enjoy using the language continuing education, and perhaps the individual who asked the question picked up on that. It is not technically required at this time, other than in the reverse mortgage space. However, I really hope that everyone will avail themselves of, in fact, courses through our partner agencies or directly through our own office. I think it's about staying current and up to date in the field. I think I'd be interested to hear all of your thoughts about that. Many disciplines do require some form of continuing education, but at this time, it's not required.
Okay. Housing counselors have lost a lot of institutional knowledge since the last housing crisis. It takes 3 months to get a counselor up to the level where they can counsel to meet current needs. Never mind anticipated needs, a lot of us need more trained counselors. What can HUD do to support rapid training and support the agency that is carrying the untrained counselor for 90 days?
Yeah, so we are actively with all of our partners who provide training discussing the importance of providing courses with regard to foreclosure prevention as well as sustaining tenancy or eviction prevention. I think everyone has seen the wonderful work that has occurred in our series of webinars with regard to eviction prevention and other related systems for the safety net there. We're going to be moving forward into a series of advanced trainings also in foreclosure prevention as well. And I invite everyone to take full advantage of all of these trainings and courses. Also on the HUD Exchange, you will see more and more information about resources and approaches to programming. And it's our hope to have all of our trainings available for video, for viewing at any time on demand. So we're really trying to ramp up on these fronts right now.
Okay. Can you talk about the status of the HUD Housing Counseling Federal Advisory Committee?
Yeah. So that was one of the first subjects that I reviewed with the Office of Housing Counseling staff in early December. I will share with you that we have reviewed the over 50 applicants or nominees for the 6 open positions that currently exist. And we have made recommendations to the Secretary's office. Now, the one thing that's a little bit of a wild card is, and you may have read about this, of course, the administration is a new administration, and they are looking at all boards and committees across all programs right now. So we're waiting to hear back on this front. I'm very excited. First, thank you to everyone who applied. Such a talented and robust pool of qualified professionals in each of the areas, real estate, consumer, counseling, and lending. As far as the number of seats on that council, that is something that I will wait for leadership to make a determination on. Everyone is very aware that the number of seats was reduced by the previous administration, but recommendations have been made, and we're waiting to see what the administration does moving forward. And we'll let everyone know when a decision is made and we're moving forward. I really would like to get the group going. It's some tremendous people, and we have a need for their expertise and engagement as we move forward right now.
I will just let you know that we are getting some comments that continuing education should be required.
Well, please share more feedback with us and the extent of it. My first priority, of course, is to reach what we call full certification. And my real hope is we even can exceed that. The numbers that we've used are always a little bit floating based on what information we have from you. But I'm so excited that you have reached this milestone. Again, it appears very close to 80% right now. So let's bring it home, and then we'll talk about continuing education and also future modifications to improve upon our program.
Great. Okay, what would it look like for HUD to modernize and address the increasing demand for virtual and phone-based products and services? Can you share any shifts in policy or funding that are being considered?
What I will say is that internally at the Office of Housing Counseling, as well as in partnership with NHRC and others, we're inviting feedback. And I think we have so many learnings from the pandemic itself. And also I'll share some challenges, because in the survey that many of you responded to, the major issue with regard to convening housing counseling staff via telework has been technology and access to various client documents and other issues. So we have challenges in this space to work through. At the same time, there are many organizations that are doing effective telework or other type of activities. And I think as we take a look at potential rulemaking to modernize the Office of Housing Counseling and some, brick and mortar, is that, where does brick and mortar stand in this equation, for example? I think we need to be sure we have a credentialed, not-for-profit organization. But, again, with all of the technology today, groups, particularly in rural areas, there are so many ways of meeting a client's needs. So this is an area that we're examining. There's a lot of thinking and thought going on, and please share your thoughts with us as well. Ultimately, if there is some changes or rulemaking in this space, it will be public and it will have public comment. But your opinions right now are welcome, because it can allow us to form some very good approaches to these issues.
Is there a plan from the Office of Housing Counseling to promote careers in this field? Most of the time, local organizations don't have resources to promote these positions or don't really know how to promote these careers.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And, I think, again, one of the hopes that I have is as we move forward, we're going to engage each of our internal constituencies in a more direct way. So, for example, local housing counseling groups, housing finance agencies, and intermediaries are all very important components of our program. I want to be sure that we're providing services that meet the needs of each of those groups, as well as meet all of the needs of these groups together collectively. So we're thinking of ways now to better serve independent and local or regional groups. And I think that's going to allow for deep dive discussions that are more nuanced among our counseling community on issues. Relative to the professional role of housing counselors and how they're perceived, again, that's an area of focus, both from a marketing perspective, but also how we hope to engage with the National Association of Realtors, the Mortgage Bankers Association, FHA, and Fannie Freddie, all of our partners as well, by simply suggesting that they celebrate the role of counselors and describe the credentialing of counselors and the impact of our constituency. I think we can take very meaningful small steps to build the role of the counselor and respect for them. At the same time, if we then have resources to begin to market particular programs, in the short term, it may be some of the more hardship-related programs because of the realities we're dealing with, but then in turn to other programs such as pre-purchase or improved marketing of other products that we're involved with. It could be, for example, areas of financial management and capability. Many of you are really growing in that space. I think it will be win-win. It is in our thinking as part of our strategic planning internally, but we still have to build this out further.
I'll add to that NHRC is working on a career path for housing counseling, and we have engaged with Housing Action Illinois around trying to create kind of a fast track training. We've engaged with Home Free USA and with Fannie Mae around engaging students in HBCUs to try to really open up the possibility of looking at housing counseling as a career path. So
I really want to commend NHRC's activities. I mean, it really mirrors what many more socially conscious corporations are doing in the private sector and some trade associations. That's a great program.
And somebody is asking about getting a recording of this, and just so you all know that the recording of this leaders call is going to be sent out to the Leaders in Housing Counseling listserv. It will either be late tomorrow or early Monday.
If I may, Ellie, a favor to the group. Another issue that we saw from our December feedback on the survey is that for many of you, you are beginning to see a very significant increase in rental counseling requests, particularly some of the concerns with regard to stability or eviction. There is also a less dramatic increase in foreclosure prevention, but an increase. And I'll ask that everyone really keep us in the loop with issues that you see emerging. It is a focus of HUD right now to really be active in this space. And it's very helpful to us to be knowledgeable as we look to putting this NOFA on the street for eviction prevention.
Okay. There's a question that has a little bit of alphabet soup, but maybe you know what it is. Will HUD be able to coordinate with NIS because continuing education is required there as well? Industry standards.
Yeah. The answer is absolutely yes. And I look forward to that discussion and working with leaders in that space. It's an area that, again, I have not done yet, but I understand the importance of the issue. And I know members of our staff certainly have been involved, but look forward to that role moving forward.
Okay, here's an interesting question. We are starting to hear about landlords using lease renewal denials to force out tenants who've been unable to pay rent due to COVID-related issues, but could not be evicted due to the moratorium. It essentially circumvents the eviction process. Is HUD looking at this issue and how it can be addressed?
Wow, thank you for sharing that with me. And we are going to look at the issue now. I was not aware of that. It has not come up in any of the initial conversations that we've had with legal service providers or with housing counseling groups, but that is a very important issue that we need to be very sensitive to.
Great. So that was the last question, David, and I'll just say a lot of people are commenting, thank you. This was really informative. They were happy to hear the question and answer. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump off the call, but let me say, please, as I shared my first letter to everyone, feel free to drop me notes via my email. Feel free to call your point of contacts. We want to work very closely and support you, and while at the same time, really building the program over the coming years. Thank you for everyone for everything that you do every day. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. Great. Well, that was very encouraging, and we have, I think, we've created a lot of both opportunity and appreciate the amount of transparency and accuracy and access that exists here. So great, and thank you everybody for your questions. So quick reminder about joining NHRC. We are continuing to get the discount credit reports, and the Savvy program is, we're actually looking at a conversation with them about maybe increasing the availability of this. We'll see. So all those are great, but the real thing is you're really supporting our work in trying to engage with Congress, with the administration, and provide resources like this event. So please, if you haven't joined, join now, and we really do appreciate last year having a strong renewal year of the membership. So thanks for all that. You can get the membership renewal form off of the internet at our website, or you can email me or Ellie, and we'll be glad to send it to you. All works really well. We'll watch the leaders and housing counseling list for the next call. We haven't scheduled one yet, and so it might be in a week, it might be in 2 weeks. Give ourselves a little bit of time. We'll probably do some more looking at deeper dive into some of the policy issues that we've been discussing, and we will have some more research things that we talk about on these calls. So as always, thanks for the good work you're doing, and we'll stay in touch.